Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Me Future Talks. Today is day number 2 out of 4 talks, out of 4 days of talks here on the Mercedes-Benz stage. For the next 3 days, you will hear a number of experts and discussion panels and insights on this stage. We'll cover a range of topics. We'll talk about the confluence of machines and humans, of the real and the artificial, and we'll discuss here, and we want to hear from you, how we can design our cities and our homes to be smarter and more affordable, healthier, and how we can thereby create communities. Today, specifically, is also going to be a lot about innovation. We're going to hear from various experts how they inspire innovation in their companies, what methods they use, and why diverse thinking is important in the realm of innovation. But first up, right now, we'll hear about the Mercedes-Benz case strategy. Autonomous, connected, and electric, the integrated mobility systems of the future, and how they will impact smart cities. So our very first speaker has been at the Daimler AG since 1998, and he's climbed the ladder since then with various positions both in Germany, and then in 2013 until 2016 he was the CEO and president of Mercedes-Benz Portugal. Today he's here as the head of sales and marketing of Mercedes-Benz Case EQ. Please welcome Jörg Heinermann.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Hello. It's very nice to be here. I'm happy to be here to hold a short presentation on what we're working on in CASE. How do we connect the C, the A, the S, and the E, and what the connection of these will be in terms of impact for cities, what we can contribute to cities, what is our vision of future. And I will give you that introduction and that explanation from a point of view of marketing, from a sales point of view. So I'm not going too much into products. I'm not going to talk much about cars today. I'm really going to talk more about what is it that we think customers can draw out of it, what is the perspective of a customer, what are the use cases that we want to offer, what is the way that we want to give customers access to mobility in the future. And we have a very clear vision on that. We have a very clear picture on where we want to go and what we want to do. And that is the picture that I will show you in the sequence of this 30 minutes now. At the end, we'll have a short time also for a Q&A, so just stay here, keep your questions for the end, and then we'll go into that. Now, when I say we have a clear vision of the future, we have a clear picture, this, of course, you would say is one thing that you have to have. This is one very important element to be designing where we go. And another element that you could go for when you say, okay, what do we want to happen, what do we have to do, is to say, what do we not want to happen? What is it that we want to avoid? And here comes something that we as an automotive manufacturer take very seriously, we take much concern about, which is our environment, which is how the world itself will develop, because what we are looking at right now in this world are pictures like that, and this is not how we are envisioning the future, nor is this, nor is something like that. The future that we are designing is really looking at finding solutions, and especially in cities, if you look here at congestion, at smog, at air pollution, we are really looking at solutions to avoid these first 3 pictures that I was showing you, and this is what we are addressing by CASE. You have heard the 4 letters, you have heard the C, the A, the S, and the E being discussed, being explained, and I want to walk you through these 4 letters in a short sequence now. The first element, of course, is the E for electrification, or as I usually tend to say, for environment, for the question of how can we avoid pollution. And we have done great progress over the last years. We've gone far ways to improve the reduction of CO2 emissions in the classical lineups by introducing hybrids. And of course now, and here's one example, there's another example over there of the smart vision. The next big step now is of course the electrification. And I'll come to that in a second and go a bit deeper into it. But there's more than that. There's more than that to the future, to the way that mobility in the future will develop. And these are some major trends that I'm showing here on the lower line that we have to take care of. Besides the emission elements, besides the trend or the major trend of sustainability being a very important topic to be tackled, we have urbanization, more and more people living in bigger cities, in conglomerations. So it's not just about the emissions of vehicles, it is also of how do you avoid congestion? How do you avoid that people get stuck in traffic in the morning? How do you avoid that the whole traffic system breaks apart? We have, at the same time, a strong push for individualization. How do we, as a premium company, as a major brand, address the individual needs of our customers? How do we individualize more and more their specific demand? And in the last point, it is the digitization. It is the availability of your mobile phones all over the world being connected. And this is what brings the 4 digits together with the C for connectivity, the A as a major trend for autonomous driving, and the S for 2 elements, which is shared and services. So before digging a bit deeper into these 4 on the left-hand side, let me give you one brief outlook again on the electric part. We are investing roughly 10 billion euros these days into the development of new vehicles. We will launch 10 fully electric vehicles by the end of 2022. So we are really pushing into drivetrains now and electrification of vehicles. But we don't stop there. We have understood that it is not just about producing these lovely cars with new drivetrains. For the experience, for the mobility of a customer, for the experiencing of electric mobility, there is a further element there, which is to ensure that also the charging, the way that you get to your electricity, the way that you fill up these vehicles is a very imminent part, because it is so different to what you are experiencing today when fueling your car. And therefore, we are not just developing the cars, we are strongly investing in several areas also into the building up of networks, and even more important, into solutions of how can customers charge their vehicles at home, how can they charge at public, how do we interconnect, how do we allow a customer when on the road to pre-book a filling station of electricity, so that when he gets there, the station is free for him, waiting for him to then be charged within a few minutes and go back off onto the road. So it is a total environment that you have to fulfill. It is not just the cars and not just the charging. But for today, I was asked, let's talk a bit about cities. Let's talk about what is mobility of the future, what are the answers of you as an automotive manufacturer, of Daimler as an auto manufacturer, to fulfill these or to answer these questions of congestion, of pollution, and so on. And these answers don't stop here with the E. These answers really go into the combination of all these 4 digits. And here now comes something that when we look at the development of our mobility into the future, comes something which is quite interesting in terms of the sequence that we are addressing the topics. On the one hand side, the electrification, as I just mentioned, but on the other hand side, the combination of the C, of connected cars, of your mobile phones and your using of a mobile phone to get connected with your car, and the autonomous driving as a feature in the car, the possibility to have cars drive themselves without a driver. Cars to come Robo Taxis. The combination of those two is what we propel under shared mobility. So effectively, and this is why we have shown here a little distinctive line, there's two major trends. There's the electrification on the one hand side, and there's the developing of totally new forms of mobility on the other side through the combination of the C for connected and the A for autonomous, leading to shared mobility and leading to totally new services. And I want to give you an example on that to grasp a little bit the idea of what can happen if we combine these very well. And I'd like you to just envision for a second your typical daily commute. Your way into your workplace in the morning, your 35, 40 minutes drive that you're having on a daily basis. You would sit in your car today and, of course, focus on the traffic. The combination of the connected and the autonomous now lead us to totally new forms of your experience of mobility. We will be able, in these new mobility forms, to offer you, within the vehicle, access to your working habits. You can, while you drive over to your workplace, already start doing telephone conferences. You can have video conferences in the car, or if you prefer, you can just watch the latest movies or listen to your favorite music. We take off from you the strain of driving and enhance the interior of the car to a third place, which is pretty much like your living room today, an area which you can use for your personal leisure, for your personal use, and have that additional time every day of the commute to work and back from work to be used for you personally. You've seen here on the booth and in this presentation our Mercedes-Benz user interface, the MBUX. Have a look at that after the presentation, see a little bit more of what we experience in here, what we are planning to do. So we are really going very different ways of what you can do in the car while you're commuting to your workplace. And now comes the next thing, and now I'm going to broaden the picture a bit more, because what you hear these days very often when we talk about connected, when we talk about autonomous, is sharing, is the ability to use vehicles as robo taxis and make that part of the mobility of the future, which is very true and a very valid idea. Not everybody, and when I'm talking about commuting, not everybody in the future will have to have his own car to drive to work. We will also see, through this combination of the C and the A market appearing of robo-taxis which drive you to work and probably offer the same leisure, the same experience in the car, but then when you go into the work, these cars take off to get the next customer. Now, as you know from us, we are thinking in terms of mobility, in terms of choices. And that's why I said before, what I want to give you today is an overall picture of all the possible solutions we are looking at. And we are therefore very clearly distinguishing the market of the future of mobility into two areas. We are distinguishing it into exclusive mobility, which is the forms of mobility that you know today, that you would own a car, that you have your personal access to your car, and you decide as a customer what time of the day do you go where, what do you do in the car, and the market of shared mobility or shared use. So that you call a car, you call a RoboCab to pick you up and then do your commute, but that car would take off afterwards. Now, when looking at these two lines, it is very important for us in the development now, in the developing of the next steps of this mobility, to understand which of these trends are we gonna expect when, and what is the sequence. What is the sequence of these technologies, of these game changers to happen? What is the sequence of them to be implemented into the market? And as you can see here, The first two elements that we see coming up is the C, because the connectivity is actually already there. All of you have at least one mobile phone in your pockets right now. Many of you will have two. And the second thing now, which is now pushing up, is the E. This is the two things that we are focusing on right now for the implementation in the next years. The next step then will be that due to the connectivity, more and more people will be able to offer services. As I mentioned before, when commuting to work, you can you have services in the car, you have new experiences in the car, especially in the upper line, in the exclusive use. At the same time, the connectivity of cars, the mobile phones in your hands allow us to offer ride-sharing, ride-hailing, solutions like My Taxi, which will start to push up the market of shared mobility. And in the third phase then, with the autonomous coming to it, we then see the appearance of self-driving cabs. We see the appearance of a market of shared mobility pushing up much further, because the taking away of the driver out of that service takes down the cost tremendously and makes the whole use much, much more efficient in terms of costing. So there's a sequence of these mobility elements to happen. And the interesting part now is the exclusive part of it. The owning of a car will remain true luxury. And this is what this brand is all about. We are premium, so we are really focusing on this experience to own a car and to drive a car in the exclusive environment as something that we want to make very special for you, very individualized, very specific to your individual needs, while, and this is the important point now, at the same time developing the lower line. As you know from us today, we do not have just one car. We do not just have the S-Class. We do not just have the E-Class. We are offering a very broad variety of vehicles to our customers, for each individual customer to decide for his specific needs, for his specific likings, what is the kinds of mobility that he wants to experience. And we will do exactly the same still in the future by combining these two into one ecosystem. By saying, for example, that you live in LA, you do your daily commuting with your exclusive use, individually owned vehicle, you drive into the city with that vehicle, but now you have flown to Las Vegas, you are here for the convention, and any forms of mobility that you are experiencing in Las Vegas during the time here is still happening in the same app that you use to open and close your Mercedes-Benz in your daily commuting. We can envision flat rate leasing rates, which do include at different places the access to mobility, to shared mobility out of one hand, or even family packages where in a family where probably you own 2 or 3 cars today, you would probably own 1 car less in the future, but at the same time have access to shared mobility, to other forms of mobility within that same package, within that same offer. This is our overall vision of where we want to go with mobility. And you might now ask, okay, is this just, we call this future talks? Is this just theory? Is this a vision? Or is this something that you're really working on? Is this something that you really have at hand? Or in other words, how fit are we? How fit is Mercedes-Benz as the inventor of the car to go that route and to really implement these changes that we are offering here? And I just want to give you 3 examples on that to answer that question. One, for these 2 markets, for this market of exclusive mobility and shared mobility, you need hardware. And you need different kinds of hardware, because on the upper line here, on the exclusive use, you need passenger cars, you need highly exclusive cars, you need very well-equipped cars, which is our passenger car lines. On the lower line, you might want to have rather van concepts, minibus concepts, to commute people and probably also combine people in a ride-hailing access. Daimler is fit, and you probably know, with brands all over the world, not just in the passenger vehicle segment, but also in the van segment and in the commercial segment of trucks, because now comes another question I was asked. Now, if you want to change cities, it is very clear that if we talk about congestion of roads, we cannot stop discussing at people transport. There is also goods and cargo hauled into the city and rubbish and stuff hauled out of the city. So to really address the topics of the future of cities, you have to have a combined vision of both people and cargo. And here we come as Daimler, as an organization with brands all over the world, both on the truck, on the commercial vehicle side and the passenger vehicle side, to say we can address that with our products from a hardware side. Now comes the second element, and the second element now is how do we combine that? How do we create access, digital access? How do we use artificial intelligence to bring these services together and make them usable? And again, just a few examples to see what we are working on and what we already have in place as Daimler AG. We have already launched and in place systems like Movil. You might not have heard of too often, because usually we use it in the background. It is a system that cities can use as a backbone to combine intramodular transport, where as a customer you can just from the location you are say where do you want to go, and combine taxi, tram, fast train and other forms of transport into one sequence of transportation paid in one app. For you, one ticket, one payment out of one app of a combination of intramodular transport. Or My Taxi, or all the other Blackline and Car2Go that we have already in the market. And this is the point I'd like to stress here. This is not visions. This is applications, that is services, this is products we have in the markets with thousands and thousands of customers already every day in the marketplaces. We are learning a lot with these applications about artificial intelligence, about how to combine, how to predict traffic flows. And with that combination, we can really go that step further to say, now let's build that combined ecosystem that I was talking about before. And last point, last but not least, the cars itself. So for that exclusive use, for that market of exclusive mobility, we, of course, as the inventor, as the founder of the car, have a very long history and know of what we are looking at. And we are developing totally new forms of vehicles, totally new experiences for you as a customer in terms of your mobility of the future. But to wrap it up and to make a summary of all these points, and I think, again, salesmen, marketing, from a marketing point of view, the really important point here is we want to give the customer the choice to decide for himself what kinds of mobilities does he want to choose in the future. As we give him the choice today to decide between the different cars, we want to give him the choice in the future to say, what form of mobility is the right mobility for me at a specific point in time or in life? And again, if you talk about shared mobility, we very often hear that the startup communities in New York, in Berlin, in Shanghai, they don't want to own cars, they rather do ride sharing, they just hop on a car. All true. In that span of the life, very true. But then they have their first kids. You have to take the child seat out of the car, put it back in, then you left your coat, then this is a time of life where probably the ownership of a car, the possession of your own car that you can access, is a very truthful and valid form of mobility. And then later again, probably you would want to have rather a form of mobility where you can choose from 6 different cars throughout the year, which one you want to use in summer, which one you want to use in winter. It is that combination of choices that we want to offer in this combined ecosystem, in this mobility ecosystem. What can we do to cities in that context? How can we help? And I mentioned already, the point of integrating cargo and people transportation, of using the data we have of our cars, of using the artificial intelligence that we can generate from autonomously driven cars, of how to run roads and how to have flow of traffic going into the city. And when I looked out of the window of my hotel room this morning, I had a very interesting view. I looked down at Las Vegas and saw a major road that comes in, about 6 or 7 lanes coming into Las Vegas, fully packed. And there was another one, 7 lanes going out, totally empty. Well, of course, because people commute into the city. And nowadays, we cannot make use of all these 14 lanes in the morning because you have traffic lights, you have the signs, you have to know who's turning left and right, where, and how do you... With autonomous cars, with the systems taking over the flow of traffic, we can combine that and say, okay, these cars don't have to look at the traffic light in that specific moment. We can use 10 lanes or 12 lanes to come in and only have 2 that go out in the morning, because these cars don't need to wait for a red or green light. We can combine them by the cars talking to each other. So these are the kinds of visions that we are working on, that we are developing right now to change, not just from an environmental point of view, but also from the point of view of experience, of user experience, the way that cities will operate. The vision and the combination of all this is what we call intuitive mobility. The idea that we are following up on, the elements that we are pushing, is to say we want you as our customers to have one choice of mobility provider, which is Mercedes-Benz, and within that one choice of mobility provider, during the span of the day, during the span of your life, you can choose which kinds of mobility you want. But we want to take away the hassle from you to think about that. Our vision of individual mobility, our vision of the way that we want to provide mobility to you, is that we want to take away the pain points of you having to think about how do I have to, what do I have to do tomorrow? How do I have to plan my commute into the city? Do I have to do a cleaning of my car? When do I go to the workshop? We want to take all these points away from you and create integrated systems where you just leave the house in the morning and the Robo Taxi is already waiting for you on the display, showing you that it will bring you to the next speed train now. Then you hop off that car, go onto the speed train, travel into the city. When you get off, you leave the exit of that speed train station, and the next RoboCab is already waiting for you. You didn't call it. It is waiting for you with your name on the door, picking you up again and bringing you to your next destination. A combination of all these different kinds of transportation, of these modes of transportation, into one integrated ecosystem which is intuitively happening around you. This is our vision. And before we go into the Q&A now, I have a little movie to wrap that all up and show it in a little film how we think that all this can look like in the future. For the moment, I thank you for the attention, and I'll come back after the movie for the Q&A.
Have you ever had the feeling that something was just right? You knew it without understanding. You understood it without knowing. That feeling called intuition is always there, trying to steer you into the right direction. Sometimes it's easy to hear, but sometimes you really have to listen closely. Mercedes-Benz uses intuition to sense your needs before you even have them, making connections that transform your car into a digital companion, creating ease that gives you more time for the important things in life, providing comfort by ensuring your safety and security, and boosting up the endless power of electric drive. Our aim is to merge products, technologies, and services into a seamless ecosystem of mobility solutions dedicated to your future.
Well, thank you very much, Jörg Heinermann. A round of applause for Jörg, please.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to give the audience a chance to ask any questions that you might have about what you just heard, but let me start off asking you about access to all of this new technology, all of this new mobility, right? We're talking about smarter cities here. There are obviously also rural areas to consider. You sort of pointed out the dichotomy between exclusive mobility and shared mobility. There are a lot of dichotomies. I'm wondering, what do you do to contribute to improving access to mobility in the future?
Well, it is the combination of both providing access through the apps, through new forms of hardware to get access to these forms of transportation, but even further to also become a provider of that kinds of services. We do not restrict ourselves to just producing the cars and then handing them over to somebody to run them. We really go all the way down to saying we want to be the service provider ourselves. We will run the fleets in the cities and provide that kinds of service ourselves.
Okay. Anybody else? Any questions for Jörg about CES or E or the impact on smart cities? Did he explain it so well? Are you just blown away? Or are you completely confused? Here we go. Joe.
Where do you see the total cost of transportation heading? So, as we get through those different modes, cost has to be an option, and we'll have to have certain, premium options, or we might have some lower cost options. How have you kind of thought through the pricing models and the business models?
On the one hand side, a cost driver right now is something pushing up the cost of mobility is, of course, the R&D into the new drivetrains, into electrification, into the infrastructure that is needed to charge these cars. This is driving up cost of mobility. At the same time, we see big chances of reducing cost of mobility on the one hand side on the shared mobility by reducing the amount of driver necessity, so by automation you're taking part out there, and then by ride hailing, by more people using the modes of transportation at the same time, several people sharing a car, people sharing minibuses, that of course brings down the cost again. But I think that the really important point is what you mentioned in your question. We will still see also in this new world different levels of cost of transportation, because as you know today from an airplane where you can choose between economy and business, also in these markets you will still see differences in the way of transportation and the cost of transportation. So I think the market will still have different segments, but it will be broader. The choice of mobility for the customer will be bigger. It is not just owning a car, it's not the only means of transportation to get into a city. You can rely on other services at the same time.
Let's have another one. Ricardo.
Ricardo.
Hi. Congratulations for the presentation, because it summarized so well all the ecosystem. We are speaking only about cities, is understandable, but how do you see electrifications beyond cities?
There's one interesting thing when we now discuss with markets about the introduction of electric cars, where to start, seeing the technological development of the cars being that for now we have lower ranges that they can do, that funny enough, especially from the rural areas, we get lots of demand for electric cars, because there people usually tend to have a house with a garage and access to charging at home. So we might actually see that electrification does not only happen in cities because of the pollution issues and the reduction of CO2, but that also customers in more rural areas that have access to charging at night and only have a typical daily mobility pattern of 60, 80 kilometers, that they would say, well, perfect choice for me, even in rural areas. I'll go for the electric car because the electric energy is cheaper than gasoline, and I can charge at home. I don't have to go to a filling station anymore. it's much more convenient. So actually the market is there for both. And it depends a little bit on how cities will develop the infrastructure, the charging infrastructure. What do we do with people living in apartments? Where do they charge? But then over time, with more and more range autonomy being built into the cars, we will see this vanish and be just one market again.
Yes. Is that Shaina? Shaina.
Hey, thanks for the talk.
Hi.
So how do you see Mercedes working with the public sector in order to implement the type of infrastructure that we would need for public charging stations and also with the autonomous ecosystem?
Yeah, we are very open to that. And we don't only restrict it to the question of charging infrastructure, where we can give lots of input to cities. Just to mention, we've, for example, just launched an app, EQ Ready app, which allows customers to, while they do their daily commute in their existing cars, to verify, could I live with an electric car? Do the ranges that I live by today already fit to the infrastructure that I have? And such an app, for example, gives us very good feedback on mobility patterns, on mobility behavior in a city. And we feed that back into the cities to give them hints of, okay, these are the points where people would need to charge at night. These are the points where people would need to charge at day. So we are very open to disclose that information, to give that to cities and develop together with them what is the infrastructure you need. And at the same time, we are very open on the shared mobility side to also work with cities on the broader picture of combining different means of transport, intra-modular transport solutions into shared mobility answers. So on both sides, we are very open to disclose all the information we have and which we can share also to cities and work together with them to develop the mobility in the future in the cities, be in a better system.
All right, we have time for one more question. I'll hand that over to you.
Thank you for your great presentation. And I have a question that smart city is a very good trend in the smart city background. But I saw that China Didi and American Uber are transferring from a car sharing company to a mobility sharing company. They are providing the smart transport.
Right.
How do you define our OEM and the car operators relationship, and whether do you feel the pressure about the change? Thank you very much.
Any pressure?
Yeah, very good. As I mentioned before, we will not reduce ourselves to just being the provider of the hardware. We truly believe that we can make a difference also by being a service provider ourselves and by implementing services and by establishing services ourselves with our own fleets. But of course, we will also work with other companies doing the same, offering our products for them to integrate them into their services. We are and have never been afraid of competition. We do think that, especially in this area, competition is very good and very sane. It will help us to develop these things faster. And then in the end, as today, we will see several brands and several firms and providers of transportation in the market, but we feel very positive that we can defend ourselves in that market and also keep a big stake in that market. For me, and probably as the last words now, the market share of the future as a salesman, today I measure market share by the amounts of hardware sold. My vision of the market share of the future is of the, let's say, 65 minutes average of mobility of a market. What is my share of the minutes? How many of the minutes of mobility of a day do customers commute in my products, in my services, with my offer in the market? This is, in our view, this is the market share of the future of mobility.
Competition helps us work better is what I hear there. That actually leads us very nicely to the next session. At 12 p.m., we'll start talking about open innovation and what it means to cooperate while also being in competition with each other. And I look forward to that. First of all, thank you very much to Jörg Heinermann for presenting the case strategy. And if any of you are interested in actually testing out what Jörg just described, the MBUX, the Mercedes-Benz user experience, is right over there for you to experience. I hope to see you back here at 12 p.m. Thank you.